As someone with ADHD, this episode was so incredibly validating and useful for me. And I hope that everyone who is listening who is neurodiverse or suspecting that they are neurodiverse or have ADHD, I hope this is a nourishing balm to your soul. I had the honor to sit down with Adele from Harmonize You, and we talked about the impact of our hormones on ADHD throughout our monthly and life seasons and cycles. Adele is a women's health practitioner and cyclical living guide, and having co authored the book Essential Feminine Wisdom, she is passionate about educating women and girls on how to harness the power of their cyclical nature. From menarche to menopause, Adele bridges the woo and the science, supporting women to balance their hormones naturally, and is passionate about speaking on all things menstrual education. Adele's niche within the women's health arena is specializing in supporting ADHD women to understand how their hormones affect their traits. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Enjoy listening. You're listening to the podcast of Iris Josephina. If you're passionate about exploring the menstrual cycle, cyclical living, body wisdom, personal growth, spirituality, and running a business in alignment with your natural cycles, you're in the right place. I'm Iris. I'm an entrepreneur, functional hormone specialist, trainer, and coach, and I am on a mission to share insights, fun facts, and inspiration I discover along the way as I run my business and walk my own path on Earth. Here, you'll hear my personal stories, guest interviews, and vulnerable shares from clients and students. Most people know me from Instagram, where you can find me under @CycleSeeds, or they have been a coaching client or student in one of my courses. I'm so grateful you're here. Let's dive into today's episode. Yeah, so Adele, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too, because the topic that we'll be talking about is very, very close to my heart. And before we dive a little bit deeper in it, I'm just curious about your story and how you started specializing in the menstrual cycle and ADHD.
Okay, so my background in a previous life, I spent 20 years working in youth justice services. And I was in quite a senior role there, and one of my lead areas was special educational needs. So I had a really good understanding of neurodiversity, which was largely based around boys at that point. And I used to joke, I worked with a lot of mental health professionals, and people say, "Oh, ADHD." And I used to joke, "Oh, that's my ADHD." But I'd been so successful, I say in inverted commas, that I never really looked into it. And it wasn't really a thing that sat with females, particularly at that time. So alongside that career, my hobby and passion was women's health and understanding health. So I was doing all the things, right? I was doing the aggressive fasting, the fasted exercising, the raw vegan diet. I was doing all these things. And then my period vanished. And I was like, that can't be a good sign. But at the time, I thought, excellent, one less thing to worry about. But there was this niggle. And I was like, okay, I need to understand this. So I've always had quite a strong feminist value base. I specialised in female offending and very passionate about supporting females with complex needs. And so I began my journey of understanding, well, if I'm doing all this stuff, why am I not well? Where's my body saying something's not working? And so I began to understand the gender bias that exists in medicine and lifestyle advice around what we should be doing to be well. And I was furious. And so that combined with other factors, I took the decision to leave that career and I wanted to retrain. So I spent some years really researching women's health and understanding the role that hormones play in everything and set up my own clinic. Well, several years ago, ADHD was coming up. It was coming into my life more and more. So I went along to a talk where there was a psych and I spoke to him and he very quickly said, "You know you've got ADHD, right?" And I was like, I had sort of thought so. So within 4 weeks, I was diagnosed, which I'd really resisted. So I was like, what's the point? I personally choose not to be medicated. It's not a path that I've chosen, but I know lots of women get, lots of support from that. So I was like, well, what am I doing it for? But actually, it ended up being one of the most validating experiences of my life. And from that, because hormones is my life, I was like, okay, where's the research? So because I say I bridge the science and the woo, that's my personality. I want the research and the data, but I really want to go there in the room and the energy and bring it all together. So I sought out the research, which did not take me very long because there's about 3 pieces of research that exist on ADHD and hormones. And of course, I ignited my inner feminist, well, not very inner, and just said, right, come on, we need to provide that. This is ridiculous. The crossover between hormones and ADHD traits in women is huge, and yet no one's talking about it. So I gathered everything that I could and combined my knowledge and experience of ADHD with the research I'd done around how that's different in females, and then brought in my knowledge of hormones and brought it together to provide a service to neurodivergent women to understand how their hormones affect their traits and what you can do about it.
Thank you for sharing that. And this is so necessary. I got diagnosed earlier this year. I'm 33 now. So,
Amazing. How was that
yes,
experience for you?
very validating.
Mm,
Like you mentioned, it's like, oh, it's all of a sudden everything starts falling into place. Like all the things that were so strange or weird or I couldn't get a grip on my entire life started to like
mm.
fall into place. And I was like, oh, okay, that's why I responded in that situation like that. Oh, that's why I'm like this. That's why I do that. That's why I'm absolutely not doing that. So,
It's so powerful, isn't it? And I think the biggest take I personally got, and this isn't every woman's experience, but I got was the self compassion and kindness I was able to offer myself. I literally felt, oh my God, there's nothing me. That's how I felt because I'd found so many things in life really fucking hard. And
mm,
I couldn't understand why. So although I'd achieved this perception of a level of its success, I'd had to work crazy hard in a way that I didn't see other people having to do with all my strategies and subconscious ways of coping in this world. And then I think probably entering into perimenopausal years, the lid starts coming off a little bit because of our
mhm.
lovely hormones, right? And I think that's so lovely that you had that experience of validation. And I see it like this unraveling. You're constantly like, oh, that's why I do that. That's why I do that. You start to, it's like you start to meet yourself in a
Yeah.
really deep way. And yeah, just give yourself that compassion.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that you say that because it's such an inner landing journey. Like for me, it's like
Mm.
every experience is like a landing in myself, which also helps my surroundings understand me better.
Yeah,
And my relationship has grown so deep and so
yeah,
much and so
yeah.
beautifully. So I'm just really grateful that
Me too.
yeah, I've got this knowledge about myself now.
And I
Yeah.
think it's also really important, probably at this point, for anyone listening to this, if they're going, well, that's not my experience. I want to really acknowledge that for some women, it can be a really painful experience to get
Mm,
that diagnosis, particularly if they don't have the support around them. Quite often, I see women struggling with their partners who are saying this stuff doesn't exist. Of course, you don't have this. You're looking for a label, you're looking for an excuse. So women are holding this by themselves. And sometimes with diagnosis, it can bring up a grief if women
yeah.
look back and go, "Oh my goodness, what could have been had this been picked up?" And we look at it through that lens, which can be quite a painful journey for women to go through, particularly if they're not well supported. So I just want to acknowledge that as well. Whilst we're like, it was amazing that actually for some women it's not that experience.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I personally did experience some of that grief.
Mm,
Like oh my goodness, like what could have been for me as a little girl, you know, all this all the struggles that I had, like maybe they could have been prevented or would have been different. So
absolutely.
I definitely can see that and feel that.
And I think, with women and girls, there's the element of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, so RSD,
Yeah.
which does not get spoken about enough. And for
Mhm.
me personally, that is the most debilitating part of my ADHD. I hate that bit. I would never swap my brain for a neurotypical brain at all. I love what it does for me. But that bit I hate. It is
Oh,
so debilitating.
same.
And as a little girl, that feeling. I used to describe it like a bomb of a million pins going off inside me, and having to
Yeah.
sit there and smile when all I wanted to do was fall apart. It's so painful. So I think this is something, I'm not saying boys do have it, but it's much more prevalent and powerful in girls. And when we're managing ADHD in females, it's looking at, with boys, we look at managing the behavior. With girls, we look at how she feels about herself. What
Mm.
stories has she learned about herself that we take through with us? That narrative, that inner critic, which shows up really loudly at different times in our cycle, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, there's different lots of layers to this.
Yeah, definitely. And if you had to speak about how the menstrual cycle and ADHD are connected, how would you describe that?
So it's not a causal factor. I think this is
Mm.
where some of the confusion can come. We're not saying, oh my gosh, your hormones are out, therefore you have ADHD. It's not about that. It's about acknowledging that the two influence each other significantly. And it can be really difficult to unpick what is what. Particularly, for example, we're seeing a lot of women diagnosed in perimenopause at the moment. While some ADHD traits are very similar to some of the emotional mental side of perimenopause, as we go through this very
Mm.
natural, normal hormone deficiency, we start to see these things come up. So there was one study done by the Journal of Psychiatry that showed ADHD women are at much greater risk of conditions like PMDD. So in the normal population, it's about 28%, and in the ADHD population, it's about 45%. So we
Wow.
know that and this study also showed that we're much greater risk of postnatal depression, much more likely to have a more challenging perimenopause. Okay, so there's this one study that's showing us that there is this link, and there's tons. I see so many women through my clinic who anecdotally would be saying, "Yeah, this is my experience." And so we know that we're at greater risk of those challenges. We know that the hormones play a significant role on neurotransmitters. So, for anyone who doesn't know ADHD, no one can really decide what causes ADHD. There's so much misunderstood or unknown about it. But we believe that dopamine, our neurotransmitters play a role in this. So, is it that we don't produce enough? Is it that we detoxify it too quickly? But either way, our brain is like seeking out this dopamine hit all the time. Now, we know that hormones, for example, estrogen, sensitizes dopamine. So it blows my mind to think that we're completely ignoring that fact. And I think we have to acknowledge here that gender bias. I mentioned this in being across the board with medical and health advice, and it's so stark in ADHD because basically everything we know about ADHD is based on naughty little white boys. And
Yeah.
that does not take in the female experience at all, and our hormones play a huge role. And I actually believe my approach to working with women is say, let's sort your hormones out, and then you will know exactly what you're dealing with the ADHD trait. And you'll be able to create this ADHD lifestyle for yourself around your cycles. So to me, it's fundamental to understanding your ADHD as a woman.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And it's been my experience too. I
Mm.
started to live according to my cycle before I knew I had ADHD. And then I started reading books about ADHD. And then I was like, hold on a minute. This is something that I really relate to.
Mm.
And then it started to unravel. And when I got my diagnosis, I was like, okay, there is really some non negotiables when it comes to my menstrual cycle that I just have to do. Otherwise, everything else falls apart. So
Yeah.
I love that you work that way.
I
And
think I think you have to. And I think, there's sometimes this misunderstanding that once you start to apply menstrual cycle awareness, that suddenly you're not going to have these fluctuations. Suddenly everything's going to be fine. We're going to turn into men and be consistent throughout the month. It's like, well, I'm resting, so I should be fine. But I think it's that actually, no, we're just making space for the stickiness of it. We're making space for those big emotions, for that overwhelm, for when our strategies aren't working at work at other times. Like we're creating the space so we're not trying to push through and end up completely feeling like we're going to fall
mm,
apart. It's a feminine model of creating an ADHD friendly lifestyle, right?
yeah, for sure. And for people who are listening and maybe are thinking like, oh, maybe I have ADHD. Like, can you speak to what people may or can experience throughout their menstrual cycle if they also have ADHD?
Mhm. It's really interesting because they say if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD because it can show up so
Mm,
differently. So we know in women it tends to be more inattentive type traits, which is one of the reasons it gets missed. I'm combined type, so that includes the hyperactive element as well. But this tends to show up through my speech. I speak very quickly. I think it's like brain think that hyperness is very inside. I'm not jumping around a room necessarily. Maybe I do occasionally, but that general hyperness is inward. So it's about usually we can start to see. Probably need to backpedal a little bit about looking at estrogen and progesterone to just explain those. So I call estrogen the sexy party girl of the hormone world. Okay. So when she's there in her Goldilocks amount, she is juicy. She makes us feel good. She makes us want to socialize. She's sensitizing those dopamine. She's lifting that serotonin. So our mood is brighter, right? We're on it. Our cognitive function, our executive function, which is the big issue in ADHD. We're good. So this is the first half of the cycle, right? From when we stop bleeding right through to just after ovulation. We're riding this wave if we're in balance with our estrogen. And then if we've ovulated, and obviously only if we've ovulated, we get progesterone, who's like the Zen yoga chick, right? She comes in and goes, calm yourself down, estrogen, because too much partying makes us feel crap, right? So we don't want too much estrogen. She comes in to balance it out. Now, this can be problematic for some neurodivergent women. I think there's starting now to be a narrative that neurodivergent women can't cope with progesterone. That's not true. It's so individual. Some women will find that as that progesterone starts to rise, we've been enjoying the high of the estrogen, and she comes in, it's like, you're raining on my parade. Suddenly we're not getting that beautiful high and coping. So that luteal phase can feel really, really long. Okay, so that is one of the things that we can see there with neurodivergent women, which is quite that luteal phase is challenging. It might not be severe enough for PMDD, although, as I said, we know that we're at greater risk of that. So it's really starting to understand your fluctuation with how you're responding to estrogen and progesterone, but it's likely to be that in that luteal phase, so that bit leading up to your period, it's really challenging. The things that you can normally do with your certain strategies that you may be conscious of or unconscious of suddenly aren't working. We go into that overwhelm, we're forgetting everything, we can't remember what we're saying. Whatever the traits are for you, they really blow up in that phase. And then what happens, of course, we go into our bleed, our lovely estrogen starts to rise again around day 3, and we go, well, I was just having a bad week. And this is one of the reasons I think there can be such a delay in diagnoses for us, is because we're in that cycle month after month, year after year, until we're like decades along, right? And then we're like, actually, I think there might be something going on here. We just, because especially if we're not tracking, I'm sure lots of people listening to your podcast are, but really starting to see how things are if that is your pattern, I would really look further into that in terms of your traits.
yeah, beautiful. And as you were saying that, I was also thinking, because I haven't heard much about it, because you spoke about perimenopause, you spoke about postpartum, but obviously in pregnancy, progesterone stays extremely high as well. Have
Mhm.
you worked with women who have a very hard time with the first part of pregnancy as well?
Yes, absolutely. It's a really important point. Thank you. So, what the pattern tends to be, and of course, we're all really unique, is that the first part of pregnancy can be quite tough, particularly
Mm,
if women who've chosen to be medicated come off of that. They're obviously having to adapt to that. But equally, as you say, that rising progesterone can be really challenging. In fact, quite often there can be really, really low mood,
mm,
like quite severe. But then that estrogen starts to soar, and she becomes, all consuming during pregnancy, right? We're riding that estrogen glow generally. And lots of neurodivergent women or ADHD women find that actually it's the time of their lives because their
mm,
traits seem to go for a lot of it. That was certainly my experience, even though I wasn't aware of that. I loved being pregnant. I loved how I felt. So, but of course, then the vulnerability comes. And this is where I just want so much to change in healthcare with women's hormones generally and how we manage this. But those first couple of days after pregnancy, our estrogen can drop by up to 1,000 times. I mean, that is
Yeah.
huge. And then we wonder why women get upset. We've suddenly pushed this human being out of our body. All this estrogen has just like jumped ship and left us. We're absolutely exhausted physically, mentally, and emotionally. And then we go, oh, do you think she needs some antidepressants? And it's like, actually, let's look at what's going on for her hormonally and see if there's something we could support there. But we're just not there yet. But definitely, I would say to ADHD women, you're going to have to advocate for yourself with how things are now, and speaking to healthcare providers, speaking to support and saying, look, I recognize this could be a potentially vulnerable time for me because of the hormonal deficiency I'm going to suddenly experience. This is what I need. This is what I need in that space. It's not going to be necessarily what a neurotypical woman needs. It's going to be, this is what I need. And I think something I see in our community is this fear to express that, because we've spent our lives trying to meet neurotypical expectations,
Yeah.
and there has to be this surrender to the acceptance that we don't function like that. And that's not failing, because so often our traits are misconstrued as character flaws and we get judged on that. And we're so
Yeah.
perceptive. We pick up on everyone's nonverbal communication. So we see the way people are looking at us. We see the way our behavior is making other people feel. And it makes us mask. It makes us hide all of that and shut it down. So then it becomes really difficult to articulate what we need.
Yeah. Yeah. And you spoke earlier already about how the system is not really supporting women and girls with ADHD. How how do you see that could be better? Like what do you wish for all of us?
I mean, the hope at the moment is that we're not tolerating it anymore,
Mm,
but it's coming from the ground up. It's women
yeah.
who are saying, this isn't right. For example, we know medication works better at different times of the cycle depending on the
Yeah.
hormones. Why are we this just not standard in how we are having these conversations? So I would love that it was recognized at the top and, included, that so much more research was invested in this, that the female experience was included in assessment and treatment and support, and that hormones were an integral part of that management plan. That would be my dream, that for anyone who has an ADHD diagnosis and is receiving support through a psych or some other kind of route, that hormones are being discussed throughout that and being managed, and then giving us the permission to adapt our life around that to make an ADHD friendly lifestyle for ourselves.
Yeah. I love that, especially if people are like employed in the general like society. Yeah, like you and I, we work for ourselves. We
Yeah.
can like create our own work life
Mm.
and adapt that to our lifestyle, but not everybody has that opportunity.
And I think that's something really important to manage, because it is a privilege to,
Yeah.
there's so much. I manage my ADHD. I was diagnosed with quite severe combined type. And the reason I feel I'm able to operate like I am is I have a really robust health plan in place for myself that really
Yeah.
balances my hormones. I'm looking at my insulin, I'm looking at my adrenals and my cortisol, I'm looking at how I'm nourishing my body. I've got tailored supplementation. There is non-negotiable time for myself every single day. I have to move my body. I have to have a support network. I've got an amazing husband who just totally gets it and supports me. I'm very privileged. I do a job that I love, I'm so passionate about, and is constantly feeding my need to know more and why. It keeps me so engaged. So there are so many factors there that make this okay. But that's not lots of other women's experiences, particularly if you're like boxed into this 9 to 5 and finding no passion in what it is that you're doing, and you don't have people around you, or you don't have the resources to be able to invest in your health in the way that you want to. Everyone can move, everyone can breathe, everyone can do, some of these things, but maybe that's not, I just want to acknowledge that isn't available to everybody. And so that
Yeah.
begins the journey of having to go, okay, I need to change that.
Yeah. And do you have any easily accessible tips or recommendations for people with menstrual cycles who have ADHD or who are recently diagnosed and really have like no idea where to start? You mentioned earlier your insulin already. I love
Oh
that because
gosh,
it's the one thing that helped me so much. Like managing my blood sugar and keeping it
yeah.
balanced was like a game changer for every single aspect of my menstrual cycle, but also my ADHD.
Honestly, I feel like, I mean, that's where I start with most women, regardless of whether they're neurodivergent or not. And it's an absolute game changer. So studies show that ADHD people are much more at risk of type 2 diabetes than neurotypical people. We don't really understand why. I think there's lots of factors that affect how we eat. Dopamine comes with sugar, right? We love that.
Yeah.
Lots of ADHD people find it really don't enjoy cooking. There's too many steps involved. It's boring. We don't realize we're hungry until we could eat a small child. Like we have lots of things coming into play when it comes to food that just are additional challenges. So I think that plays a role with some of it, but who knows? There's so much we don't know about it at the minute. So balancing your blood sugars, reducing inflammation in your body and your lifestyle is a big one. Really working on your gut. We have a definite link between the health of the gut and because when inflammation comes through the gut, it actually binds with dopamine and serotonin in the brain, causing it to be inactive. So that's obviously really important for us. And of course, like loving on those adrenals. I'm a big fan of breath work. It's quite active. We tend to find it quite challenging to meditate. So, but doing the breath work is such a beautiful way. It's free and it's there for everybody. And for me, one of the biggest things that I do in clinic with women is tracking your traits against your hormonal ebb and flow. Because when you have that written down, it's so powerful. And you can use that as a tool to advocate for yourself, to learn about yourself, and to apply to your life. So, there is for any woman who's kind of feeling, oh my gosh, I've got this, it's like feeling like a victim to it. Like, there's so much you can do to be take an empowered approach to managing symptoms. Nothing's going to take it away, but it can make it so much more manageable. And we're very prone to perfectionism. Giving
Yeah.
yourself a break to go, I'm going to aim for an 80-20. And if today I'm drinking the Coke and eating the cake, then I'm going to give myself permission to do that guilt free. But what I find is because you then realize how crap that makes you feel, you do want to do that less and less and less, right? Because the other stuff's making you feel so good. We're thrill seekers. We like to feel good.
Yeah.
So
This is so
saying no
relatable.
to
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just like giggling and laughing when you were speaking because I'm like, yep, that's my life. That's my experience.
Yeah, and I think we
Yeah.
beat ourselves up that we struggle with consistency. We're like, right,
Yeah.
everything's changing. Clear the cupboards. This is what we're doing. We're all in, right? We're go. This is done. And then 3 days later, we're like in the corner going, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. I can't implement any of this. And we go back to those behaviors. So the way that I work with women is acknowledge that it doesn't work for us. So we're going to do this in a way that really embeds the change. So it just becomes what you do. And if you don't do it every day, it doesn't matter because what we do is we mess up one day and then we go, well, that's it, then that didn't work. And that's not the case. We've just got to just give ourselves that grace.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think for me, that was the one of the biggest life changers to give myself permission and accept that consistency is just never going to be my thing in that
Um,
way.
and there's so many things you can do like that, like for me, I mean, if you could see, like I'm looking at my kitchen now as we sit here, my kitchen does not look like the Instagram worthy kitchens. It's not like that because I need everything out. Otherwise, I'm not going to use it. And
Yeah, same.
I'm happy with that. If I put my NutriBullet or my food processor in the cupboard, I'm not going to go out and use it because I can't. There's too many steps involved. It's boring. I don't want to do that. But if it's there, I will use it every day and I will remember to use it because I can see it. If I can't see
Yeah.
it, it doesn't exist. So it's about, part of this accepting that's okay. Isn't that my house is never going to look like a show home? I don't want it to. It's my home and I want it easy for me, for my life. And I think there's so many, that's just a silly example, but that depth of acceptance of this is what I need. And things become so much easier when we do that.
Yeah, they definitely do. I have this app, it's called Me Plus on my phone, and it's a habit tracker, but it also reminds you of all the things that you need to do. So if I need to, like, clean my room or clean my bathroom, I will never do it if nobody tells me to. Or if I'm, like, right before my period and I'm like, "Okay, now it's, like, completely done and I have to do it." So this habit tracker tells me like, "Hey, your bathroom, is it still, like, clean?
Disgusting.
Maybe take a look take a look at that." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I should clean that."
And I
So
think
it's
we have this joke. I run a group. We have a group called ADHDers, which is turned to this lovely community, which is so nice. And we're often sharing things and like that. And it's like, if someone wasn't coming around to visit my house, I'd probably never clean it. It's that kind of clean that we do. It's like, someone coming, and then being able to laugh at stuff, maybe stuff that we've grown up being told we're really messy, we're really chaotic, we're really disorganized. I'm actually really organized, but in my way.
yeah.
It's not what would look organized to anyone else. I send my mum over the edge. She's like, "Oh my gosh, how are you doing something?" No, it's all under control. Don't worry.
Yeah, for me, it's the same. I feel really organized, and other people would say like, "Why are you doing it in that way?" I'm like, "Because it works. So I'm
Yeah,
doing it
it
this way."
works. Yeah, and just really simple things like that. My little girl, we're a totally neurodivergent family. She has a little plastic list she just flicks off every morning that she works through methodically: clean teeth, make bed, get dressed, and it looks so basic, but it works. Instead of me all morning having to say, "Have you done this?" I say, "Oh, I forgot. Oh, I forgot." She's just done it, and it just creates this peace that would otherwise be really stressful. So it's finding these little tiny things that can just alleviate so much stress and that annihilates our adrenals with all these micro stressors
Mm,
each day. If we can just find ways to go, okay, I can clear that, we can do that, it just helps to find that space away from the
yeah.
overwhelm.
That's beautiful. I love how you described what you do with your little girl
Mm,
and how you can give her probably such a different experience than you had
mm.
when you were
I, th-
younger.
I think there's so many of us trying to parent whilst reparenting ourselves. I think that's a
Mm,
lot of the like going a bit deep here, but like a lot of the sole purpose of my generation is to break patterns and
yeah.
to rewrite the narrative. And that's really challenging because it's bringing that awareness to yourself and how things were so different then. When I was a child and trying to not instill that in my own daughters, trying to find a different way and acceptance of that. It's an interesting process.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And I'm
Mm,
really looking forward to that too. Like I'm in my preconception
mm.
journey right now, and I'm really looking
Amazing.
forward to that. But I'm also aware like it's going to bring up so much. And
Mm,
it's like you said, you said it so beautifully. It's a reparenting of ourselves while parenting.
yeah, yeah,
That's actually how I envision parenthood.
yeah.
Like,
It
really.
is.
Yeah.
It really is. And yeah, it's constantly trying to be in that state of reflection and being conscious. It can be quite exhausting, but also it sounds really cliche, but like really rewarding for it. And I
Yeah.
laugh. I mean, bring it back to sort of ADHD is that can be a time again for women the lid comes off. They've coped really well, and then suddenly they have children, and you're not able to devote that time to yourself or that space in the same way, and it can be quite challenging. So again, really working with your partner around how do you create space for yourself, because I don't think as a society, we're really rubbish at honouring the mother, right? Anyway,
Mm, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I feel especially with a neurodivergent mom, like they need even more support.
Absolutely.
And there is already barely any support. So I definitely agree with that. We should focus on changing that. And I have lists like ready how I want to do that. And I already informed my family
Love that.
about how it's going to be because I really would want to give birth in the Netherlands with my family around because
Mm,
I cannot even begin to think about being on my own
mm,
with my partner who
mm.
was like away flying and then me alone with a child. Like,
Yeah,
no,
I love
no, no,
that.
no. Yeah.
Mm, and I love that you're kind of putting this is the plan. These are my non-negotiables. These are my boundaries.
Yeah.
This is how that's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
would have done things
if,
so differently.
mm, And of course, we need to be open for change and not like
Yeah.
stick to like the plan because as a mom in birth, like after birth, things can shift and change and you never know how it's going to be. But then still having this knowledge and this like boundary set up, it can really help you stay centered, I feel. If you don't have that and you just fall into it and didn't think about anything, I think it's way
Mm,
harder,
mm, yeah.
especially as a neurodivergent person.
Yeah, we love a plan.
We do.
The This is actually to a plan. I think that was one of the hardest things I found about childbirth. It's like, how long is this going to take? Because if it's only 10 years, I can just get all this. And if you just give me this, it's going to go on. We don't know. That is so jarring to me. I'm like, I need to know when this is going to happen. And then I'm fine. I can sink into it. But like, no ending is so like, oh my gosh, I've just got to sit and wait. How do we do that?
Yeah, I think I've never like really spoken to anybody like specifically like neurodivergent and having given birth.
Mm.
So that's an interesting thing to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, and actually everything that I thought I needed during birth wasn't that at all. I remember writing this plan with my first child, and I was like, because I'd read it, it's like, oh, you don't want anyone speaking to you, you want to be really silent. And then the midwife then listened to that, wasn't speaking. I'm like, I need to know everything. She said, you said you didn't want that. I was like, won't you now? I said, tell me what's happening. But again, I didn't know at that point. I was,
Yeah.
if I knew what I knew now about myself, and I think that's part of the beauty of the diagnosis, is I love self-discovery. I want to know about myself. I want to understand all of that. And I feel like the more space we can create for that exploration, the easier it gets
Yeah.
to exist.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And if you had to like drop some more like drops of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners who may have ADHD, what would that be?
I think find your people, find community, stop trying to take advice that works really well for people who don't have the same brain as you. I
Mm,
think that it's surrendering to that acceptance of being able to create a life for you. And as I mentioned earlier, I know some of that comes with privilege, but some of it comes with time, and
yeah.
putting these things in place. Don't tend to be very patient people, but being able to first bring awareness that X, Y, and Z aren't working for you in your life because of this. You are believe in yourself that you're the best person to know what you need and to create
Mm,
that change. But don't suffer alone. There's lots of us out here. There's lots of community. Just, find your people.
yeah. Thank you. And I totally agree with that. Like speaking with people who have ADHD or who are neurodivergent, it's like it's exciting to me because I don't have to
Mm,
explain myself. I don't have to like see like, oh, how are people are going to respond? Just like I can walk in, I can be me, they are
mm,
themselves, and yeah, it's so empowering.
mm.
So thank you
Definitely.
for doing what you do and creating this space for people
Oh,
as well.
thank you.
Yes. Where can people find you if they're interested in working with you or becoming a part of your community? What's the best way to connect
I
with you?
I like to hang out on Instagram as
Mm.
Harmonise You. I really love the Instagram community. I've met so many, it's how we connected, right? It's
Yeah.
so many amazing women through that space. On my website, harmoniseyou.co.uk, you can find information about my clinic, and I've got podcasts on there that I've been on, different information and resources available. So there's some free resources on there as well. So yeah, just reach out and connect. I love speaking to women about their experiences. So yeah, please do get in touch.
I'll add all your information in the show notes so people can find it easily. And I just want to thank you again for coming on, sharing your wisdom, having this conversation with me. And yeah, just keep doing this work because we need it very, very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, this wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Want to know more about me? The best way to reach me is via @CycleSeeds on Instagram. And if you heard something today and you think, oh my God, wow, I learned something new, feel free to share the podcast on your social media and tag me. or leave a review or rating. In this way, you help me reach more people like you. Thank you so much.